Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a tension that is, well, it's absolutely foundational to being human, a conflict built right into our wiring. Our mission is to understand a profound paradox. If our evolutionary success depends entirely on craving, on desire, and that constant urge to seek better, why does all this contemplative wisdom and now modern neuroscience confirm that the path to lasting happiness requires us to actually let go of that craving?
It's the ultimate psychological friction point, isn't it? And we
Wow.
are going deep into the source material. We're looking at literature from evolutionary psychology, addiction neuroscience, and philosophies like Stoicism and Buddhism to try and solve it.
Right.
We're examining how these primal reward-seeking mechanisms, which were brilliant for maximizing gene survival on the savanna, become massive liabilities in our hyperstimulated modern world.
So we're really asking, is the profound pleasure we find in stillness or in simple acceptance some kind of biological glitch, or is it actually a sophisticated adaptive strategy?
And we're going to argue for the latter, that these mechanisms for letting go are essential for long-term health and even survival when the environment is constantly pushing our craving engine into overdrive.
I love that.
Our goal is really to synthesize these fields to show you how cultivating contentment isn't a retreat from life, but maybe the most proactive, adaptive way to live it. It empowers you to actually change your long-term emotional landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting at the beginning. The engine. Why are we wired to be so relentlessly ambitious and, well, dissatisfied?
Yeah.
It starts with that classic model, the hedonic treadmill.
The hedonic treadmill is such a powerful concept because it describes something I think most of us intuitively feel.
Yeah.
It suggests that adaptation to any major life change, good or bad, is generally inevitable. You get a huge promotion, you win the lottery, but over time, your happiness level just sort of adapts and returns to this fixed baseline.
Your set point.
Your set point, exactly.
So it implies that no external change should lead to a permanent, lasting happiness boost. And our sources have some pretty concrete evidence for this, don't they?
They do. Think about a huge positive life event like marriage.
Classic example.
Right. Researchers studied a large sample of individuals in Germany, and they tracked their reported happiness levels before and after major life changes. And they found that, on average, people did not get a lasting boost in happiness after getting married.
So you get the honeymoon spike, that initial euphoria, but then what?
But then eventually the novelty wears off, and that general baseline level just kind of pulls you right back down to where you started.
Wow. So the data says a life event as huge as finding your life partner only gives you a temporary boost. That seems to fundamentally undermine the entire cultural narrative we have about success and achievement.
It does. And it explains why chasing the next big thing feels so necessary, even though it ultimately proves, a little futile. But here's where we get to the crucial nuance. The treadmill isn't perfectly rigid. If it were, no one would ever truly get happier or sadder over the long term.
Yet they do?
Absolutely. While there's tremendous stability in happiness reports over a lifetime, a significant minority of people see genuine long-term shifts.
How significant are we talking?
Well, one study showed that 24% of respondents changed significantly from their early baseline to the last 5 years of the study.
24%. That's nearly a quarter of the population whose happiness set point actually moved. That's not a rounding error.
It's not. And we saw that 9% of the people in that study changed by 2 standard deviations or more. I mean, that is a massive, statistically significant shift.
This is the opening we need to examine. Why does the treadmill hold some people firmly in place while others manage to step off and find a new, higher baseline?
And the answer takes us right back to the evolutionary drive that fueled the treadmill in the first place: dopamine.
Ah, the neurological basis of craving. Dopamine so often gets labeled the pleasure chemical, but our sources are clear, it's really the wanting chemical.
It is. It's the engine, critical for the reward circuit, which evolved for one reason: to maximize adaptive fitness and survival.
It's our ultimate motivator.
It is. It drives us toward immediate primal needs: seeking food, finding shelter, and critically maximizing reproductive success. So much of our complex behavior today was shaped by sexual selection, which is essentially just fierce competition for mates.
Let's look at the mechanics of mating strategies through that lens. If we consider, say, the male evolutionary strategy, it can be long-term, focused on pair bonding, or short-term.
Or short-term, focused purely on immediate copulation. And evolution tends to favor the desire for more sexual partners in men because of the low biological cost of a single act.
Right. For women, the cost per reproductive event is incredibly high: pregnancy, childbirth, extended care.
Whereas the investment for a male is comparatively very low, so that primal impulse to seek more partners, which significantly increases the potential number of offspring, is just a powerful evolutionary driver. That intense, immediate desire is baked right in.
It's intense, and it's effective. It's the machinery that made sure our genes made it this far.
And this desire guides mate choice by focusing us, whether we're conscious of it or not, on signals of fitness.
So for men, that mate evaluation often revolves around detecting a fitness signal related to fertility.
Precisely. For example, youthful physical features in women, things like clear skin, bright eyes, these serve as highly reliable signals of peak fertility.
And the desire for those traits fuels the craving system.
Right. Men who, across evolutionary history, had a strong desire for these fertility signals and who successfully chose and impregnated younger women would have had the greatest reproductive success. That visceral craving you feel, that is literally your survival mechanism screaming across millennia.
So, okay, we've established that this intense visceral craving isn't an accident. It's the optimal mechanism for maximizing gene propagation. It's effective, but it's intense.
But here's where we see the transition from fixed biology to flexible environment. What's so fascinating is that while the structure of desire is deep-seated, we all desire status and resources. The way we achieve or signal that desire is contextually variable.
That is such a crucial distinction for the modern listener. We all want to be seen as valuable, but the currency changes wildly depending on where you are.
Exactly. For a highly educated audience, status might be achieved through, prestige publications or a coveted job title. That's the currency of that intellectual environment.
But if you're in a different social context, say, a motorcycle gang status might be earned through bravery or physical dominance.
The underlying drive for status is the same hardwired evolutionary program, but the local language of success changes dramatically.
It's like language acquisition.
It's the perfect analogy. Every human is born with the innate device to learn a language, but whether you learn English or Mandarin depends entirely on the cultural data you receive. The psychology of maximizing fitness is fixed. The targets of our craving are culturally defined.
And that flexibility, while adaptive, also creates a massive vulnerability when the cultural context is toxic. We've established that the hedonic engine is powerful and adaptive, but now we have to ask the critical question: why does this engine, designed for survival, so often lead to anxiety, breakdown, and intense suffering in the modern world?
This is where we get into the maladaptive cycle.
Yeah.
What happens when our environment changes faster than our biology? Our neurobiology, which was designed for scarce, naturally occurring rewards, gets fundamentally overloaded by modern stimuli.
And in addiction, we see the tragic consequences.
We do. In addition, repeated excessive dopaminergic stimulation, whether it's from drugs or from constant, intense digital inputs like doom scrolling, it causes persistent neuroplastic adaptation.
But you say neuroplastic adaptations, that sounds like the brain is permanently changing its structure.
It is. And the most damaging consequence is that the reward circuit's capacity to respond to non-drug rewards is severely compromised.
So things like food, sex, money.
Exactly. Imaging studies show a marked decrease in the activation of those key brain reward regions in addicted individuals. The system that's supposed to incentivize us toward naturally pleasurable, adaptive activities is essentially numbed.
It's like the volume knob on natural joy has been turned way, way down.
Precisely. And this reduced sensitivity impairs your ability to be incentivized by those natural activities, which then fuels the compulsion to seek the next hit from the addictive substance or behavior just because the natural world no longer registers as rewarding enough. It's a cruel feedback loop.
And the mechanism of dopamine itself gets distorted over time. In early learning, the dopamine neurons fire rapidly, predicting the reward.
Yes, that's what helps us learn the behavior. But once the behavior is established, once it becomes a deep-seated habit or addiction, those firing rates progressively decrease. They switch from a conscious, anticipatory mode into a lower, habitual, compulsive mode.
So the brain gets used to it.
The brain gets used to the experience, which paradoxically fuels the compulsion to seek the experience again, even if the joy is gone. They are chasing a feeling that is no longer there.
And this compulsive seeking happens even when it's causing obvious, severe harm.
That's because this state is combined with profound deficits in the brain's ability to self-regulate. We rely on the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, for executive functions, inhibiting bad behaviors, resisting temptation, delaying gratification.
PFC is often called the CEO of the brain, right? Making the big decisions.
Correct. But the PFC is evolutionarily the newest and functionally the weakest part of our brain. It's also not fully developed until early adulthood, when this crucial circuitry is overwhelmed by a torrent of excessive dopamine, especially early in life. Control just evaporates. The seeking becomes automatic.
It bypasses the CEO entirely, and this isn't limited to chemical substances. Our sources point to incredibly common modern craving traps that hijack this exact same system, the prime example being doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling is the perfect modern example. It's the obsessive, compulsive consumption of negative online content. It feels like you're seeking information, but it's actually a highly efficient delivery system for emotional distress.
Fueled by algorithms designed to maximize outrage.
Because outrage equals clicks. And this isn't just psychological, it triggers a powerful, debilitating chemical response.
A physical response.
Yes, the obsessive seeking of threat-based information triggers the primitive fight-or-flight system. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. This leads to anxiety, insomnia, irritability.
And our evolutionary drive to seek any information, because knowing about risks is key to survival, gets weaponized by the technology. We become compulsively stimulated, seeking the next negative hit.
And we are getting the threat signal without any outlet for effective action. The brain senses threat, but there's no actual tiger to run from, so the system just gets stuck in cycles of rumination. And most alarmingly, repetitive exposure to others' trauma through this constant stream generates what's called vicarious trauma.
Vicarious trauma, the brain reacting as if the trauma were happening to us.
Exactly. Neuroimaging confirms it. You see activation patterns identical to PTSD, specifically involving the amygdala, the brain's panic button, and the hippocampus. The information age has created a situation where we are compulsively seeking the very input that damages our reward system.
So we're simultaneously breaking our capacity to feel pleasure from natural rewards and drowning our system in stress hormones. This is a profound crisis of modern consciousness.
And this is precisely where ancient wisdom provides a remarkable and frankly terrifyingly accurate diagnosis. Philosophies like Buddhism introduce the concept of tanha. It's Pali Sanskrit for thirst.
Tan. That feels like the perfect word for addiction or doom scrolling, that insatiable, agonizing thirst.
It is. Tanha is the relentless, insatiable drive of craving that binds beings to suffering, or dukkha. The Buddha taught that the cause of all suffering is this kind of desire, stemming from not understanding the momentary, transient nature of experience.
Wait, that feels extreme. We need desire to function, to get out of bed, to want a better life. Are they saying we shouldn't want success or love at all? Or is it the clinging that's the problem?
That's the key nuance. It's not the desire for beneficial things, but the clinging, the relentless thirst for things to be different than they are, or the insistence that fleeting pleasures must be permanent.
I see.
This relentless pursuit chasing evolutionary imperatives leads, in modern times, directly to the neurological state we just described. Addiction, anxiety, and the inability to feel joy from anything natural.
So the ancient diagnosis of suffering caused by craving is perfectly aligned with the modern neuroscience of a broken reward circuit, which makes the question we started with even more urgent. Why would evolution allow for the profound pleasure we find in non-craving?
If the pleasure found in craving is maladaptive in the long run, then the pleasure from letting go must be adaptive.
Yes,
This is the heart of the paradox. We have to look at how ancient philosophies were already solving this biological problem thousands of years ago.
Let's start with the great Hellenistic schools, Stoicism and Epicureanism. They both tackled the good life, but from fundamentally different views on pleasure.
Indeed. Epicurus defined the good life through pleasure, or hedona. But for him, the highest pleasure wasn't gluttony, but ataraxia, the absence of pain and unnecessary craving. It was about minimizing bad feelings to maximize tranquil, good feelings.
That sounds like a sophisticated form of pleasure maximization. It's still focused on the sensation of pleasure.
That's the key distinction. Epicurus put good and evil on the level of sensations. The Stoics, on the other hand, argued that good and evil exists solely in the attitude we take towards sensations.
The healthy soul is ruled by reason, not pleasure.
Exactly. Marcus Aurelius asks, were you born to please yourself? An Epicurean would say, yes, wisely. A Stoic answers with a resounding, no, you were born to serve reason.
So the Stoic approach is centered on intentional, voluntary discomfort.
Right. Think of Seneca. He practiced abstaining from pleasures, sleeping on a hard floor, eating meager food, precisely when everyone else was indulging. This wasn't punishment, it was mental training.
He was testing his mind's strength, So he wouldn't take things for granted. It was like preventative medicine against the weakness of luxury.
Exactly. The goal of practices like imagining future misfortunes wasn't to be morbid, but to achieve complete indifference to so-called misfortunes. If you practice accepting the loss of health in advance, the actual event loses its power to disrupt your internal state. You become free from the grip of craving.
This philosophical case for restraint aligns perfectly with the meditative view. Accepting and allowing what is without resistance is the first step toward conscious action. It's the direct opposite of that compulsive pursuit of pleasure.
And here's the synthesis. The pleasure derived from letting go exists because it is an effective, biologically sophisticated mechanism for healing the damage caused by the constant pursuit of craving. If craving breaks the reward system, then cultivating non-craving is the adaptive repair strategy in a hyperstimulated environment.
So the goal isn't just to feel calm, it's to actively repair the neurological system. What does the neuroscience say about this?
The evidence is overwhelming. Mindfulness practices aren't just stress relief, they actively reshape the neural circuits compromised by addiction. Consistent practice significantly reduces overactivity in two key areas. First, the amygdala.
The brain's panic button, so we're dialing down the constant state of alarm.
And second, and maybe even more critically, the insula. The insula is the brain's internal barometer. It integrates all our internal physiological states, pain, hunger, and critically, the urge to use or crave something. Chronic craving overloads the insula, making that internal experience intensely compelling.
So calming the insula must directly reduce the sense of compulsion. It's like you're giving the observer a seat outside the intensity of the feeling.
And we see even deeper changes. Long-term meditators can self-induce high-amplitude gamma synchrony. These are exceptionally fast brainwaves associated with highly integrated cognitive processing. It's literally restructuring the brain toward resilience.
If the brain is being restructured, what's the single mechanism that gives us control over our primal urges?
It is the introduction of a therapeutic delay. Mindfulness creates a conscious pause between the feeling, the urge, and the automatic response. The practice creates a therapeutic split in the ego.
That concept disidentification. Seeing thoughts and feelings as just transient mental events, not as the reality of who you are, that's what stops the automatic loop.
Precisely. It inhibits the automatic action, leading to true, actionable freedom and control.
This brings us to the mindfulness to meaning theory, or MMT, which is a wonderful bridge between spiritual practice and clinical benefit.
MMT proposes that mindfulness doesn't just interrupt the downward spiral of negative affect, but it actively induces an upward spiral of positive affect. It works with processes like savoring, enhancing positive emotions, and reappraisal, reframing difficult parts of life as meaningful.
Savoring seems absolutely key here, especially for someone whose reward system has been blunted by addiction. If your brain can't register natural joy anymore, craving is the only option.
That's the vulnerability. We can look at some groundbreaking clinical research here. The Mindfulness-Oriented Recovery Enhancement, or MORE, intervention studied participants with opioid use disorder. People with OUD often show weakened brain responses to naturally rewarding things like beautiful sunsets or smiling babies.
Their internal world has literally been drained of natural joy.
Right. And this blunting of positive emotion was directly correlated with high opioid craving. Their natural reward system was offline.
So the craving system wins by default.
Exactly, but the MORE therapy specifically aimed to repair this damage. After the intervention, researchers found that it increased brain responses to those positive stimuli. It helped patients regain the fundamental ability to savor life's small joys.
And the results?
Critically, this positive neurological change was associated with 50% lower opioid craving compared to standard group therapy.
That is powerful evidence. The pleasure of non-craving is adaptive because it reconnects you to the inherent richness of experience. Happiness born of acceptance, rather than compulsive pleasure, fundamentally restructures your brain to experience that richness naturally. That's incredibly motivating. The idea that non-craving is a mechanism for neurological repair. So if we accept this, we need actionable, concrete tools. How do we actually cultivate this intrinsic well-being in our daily lives?
We can start with the practice that flows directly from the neuroscience of the observing self, the practice of detachment or disidentification.
Right. In deep meditation, the observing self experiences its true nature, devoid of all the mental chatter, the ideas, the judgments, the compulsive thoughts.
This is where we learn to stop seeing thoughts and feelings as reality or who we are, and start seeing them as just transient mental events.
Which is easier said than done, especially when the thoughts are fast and loud.
It is. The technique involves using mental metaphors to provide some necessary distance. We perceive thoughts as events that simply pass by. Think of them as clouds in the sky, moving at their own pace. You are the sky, you are not the cloud.
That gives you a great sense of permanence. The self is the underlying constant, while the thoughts are just changeable weather patterns.
Or, if the mind is full of anxiety, you might visualize your thoughts as leaves floating rapidly down a stream. The stream is moving fast, but you are sitting quietly on the bank, watching. You're not in the water.
I also like the railroad metaphor. You suddenly realize you've hopped onto a racing train, a thought loop of worry, but the practice is recognizing that you can choose to step off and just watch the train pass.
The goal is simply to observe the thought without identifying with it or feeling compelled to act on it. And crucially, this is the opposite of suppression. If you try to fight a thought, you activate it. The mindful approach is to bring awareness to it, acknowledge it, and let it be.
And this principle of non-reactivity can be applied to the most challenging thing of all, intense cravings, using the technique known as urge surfing.
Urge surfing is a core mindfulness technique, central to relapse prevention. It's built on the understanding that urges are not static. They are temporary phenomena with a natural beginning, middle, and end.
And the metaphor is key. You picture the urge as a wave.
Yes. Instead of fighting the urge, which is like being slammed by the wave, or instantly giving in, you learn to ride the wave. You recognize that the wave will swell to a peak, but it must crest and break, and then it will subside.
So practically speaking, what does riding the wave look like in the body?
It involves a few steps. First, recognition. Just name the urge internally. Second, attend to the physical sensations. Where do you feel it? Is it a tightness in your chest? A fluttering in your stomach? You just observe these physical sensations with intense curiosity and patience without judgment.
And the breath is your anchor through all this.
The breath is your grounding tool. It's the pulse of the water beneath the wave. You stay anchored to the simple sensation of breathing in and out while the urge rages. By observing the urge's physical components, you demonstrate that even at its peak intensity, you are still the one in control.
And feeling eventually subsides.
It does, often within 15 to 30 minutes, proving that the urge is not you and it cannot force you to act.
This entire system detachment, urge surfing, it's fundamentally about calming the internal chatter that leads to so much anxiety.
Exactly. And that chatter is housed largely in the default mode network, or DMN. We can call the DMN the brain's internal time machine. It's the center of self-referential thought, constantly concerned with past failures and future worries.
And when we're caught in DMN activity, we're essentially just ruminating.
Yes, and that mind wandering has significant psychological costs. Performance declines, increased stress, that constant feeling of being unsettled. It keeps the patterns that lead to suffering perpetually active.
So how does mindfulness practically shut down this internal time machine?
Formal mindfulness practice, like focusing on the breath, reduces activity in the DMN, specifically in the posterior cingulate cortex. This leads to a loss of that reflective self-consciousness, a sense of being fully present, anchored in the moment, rather than being pulled into the past or future.
And finally, our sources introduce the secular Dharma approach, like the ELSA model, which emphasizes embracing difficulty using compassion. This feels crucial for healing the deep shame that often fuels the craving cycle.
Absolutely. The ELSA recovery model has several goals, including letting craving go and critically seeing and savoring the stopping of craving. But the cornerstone of the approach is cultivating metta, or unbounded friendliness.
Friendliness not just for others, but friendliness toward the difficulties and natural pain of life itself.
The ability to substitute self-loathing, which is the constant companion of addiction and failure, with genuine self-love is crucial for recovery. This involves turning toward and acknowledging difficulties rather than compulsively avoiding them.
Avoidance is the impulse that leads to escape behaviors.
Exactly. Mindfulness promotes the acceptance of challenges, recognizing that pain is inevitable, but suffering clinging to the pain is optional. This acceptance is the first step toward conscious, beneficial change.
We started this deep dive with profound evolutionary paradox. Why are we designed to crave when letting go of craving feels so much better and leads to genuine, lasting happiness? We've traced the journey from the biological imperative of seeking fitness signals, watched that system break down into maladaptive cycles in the modern world, and found the solution in cultivating this intrinsic well-being.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, the pleasure found in letting go, the satisfaction of non-craving, is highly adaptive. because it acts as an evolutionary patch for the neurological damage caused by constant stimulation.
It's a repair mechanism.
It directly addresses the decreased sensitivity to natural rewards and overrides the compulsive behavior of the reward circuit.
So the immediate drive for maximizing genetic fitness becomes secondary to the long-term goal of maximizing neurological resilience and psychological stability. Contentment isn't a luxury. It's the essential self-regulation tool needed to operate adaptively in a world drowning in overstimulation.
Exactly. By practicing acceptance, individuals gain self-regulation and a sense of freedom from habitual urges. Happiness born of acceptance, rather than that relentless immersion in fleeting pleasures, allows one to experience the permanent, inherent richness of life without being beholden to the treadmill.
And this brings us full circle to that crucial statistical anomaly. The 24% of people in that German study whose happiness set point did change significantly.
Right. Research in psychology shows that neurotic individuals often choose ineffective passive coping strategies like denial or avoidance, which leads to greater emotional reactivity and a slower return to their baseline happiness.
Whereas optimistic, resilient individuals tend to engage in active coping.
Yes, strategies that aim to resolve or fundamentally change the stressful situation.
Active coping is what gives you the psychological payoff and allows your baseline to shift.
So, we have to ask, if active coping leads to resolution and psychological payoff, does the profound pleasure derived from non-craving not represent the ultimate, most sophisticated form of active coping?
Wow.
It's not merely resolving one stressful situation, but fundamentally changing the way the brain responds to all situations. It's a method that permanently increases your emotional resilience and changes the long-term happiness set point itself.
That reframes the entire quest for contentment.
Yeah.
It's not about retreating or settling. It's about engaging the world with neurological clarity and strength.
And this knowledge empowers you to understand that you are not a prisoner of your primal urges or your environment. You can actively retrain your brain using acceptance and detachment to achieve lasting beneficial change. You have the power to step off the treadmill.
An incredibly powerful and empowering note to end on. Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And for you, the listener, here is the final provocative thought to sit with. If the ultimate evolutionary advantage is resilience, and contentment is the highest form of resilience, what small compulsive craving, a scroll, a bite, a purchase, could you choose to observe and simply let go of today, beginning the repair work in your own brain? The freedom to choose is your most powerful tool.